The auditorium lights were blinding, but the darkness in my soul was absolute. For as long as I can remember, my reality was defined by the time signature and the crescendo. My name is Elias, and until very recently, I was the undisputed master of the orchestra, a world-renowned maestro who believed he held the power of the divine in the tip of a carbon fiber baton. The concert hall was my temple, the symphony my prayer, and the applause of thousands my only validation. To me, there was no God higher than Beethoven, no spirit more holy than the perfect resolution of a complex chord. I viewed the religious with a kind of polite, distant pity. I often thought, why do they kneel in dusty pews seeking a silent savior when I can conjure heaven with a wave of my hand? I found the stories of the Bible to be charming myths, useful for dramatic choral texts like Verdi's Requiem, but utterly irrelevant to the modern intellect. I was arrogant, wrapped in the velvet of my own prestige, believing that because I could interpret the sublime, I was its source. It was late October of last year, 2024, a Tuesday night that smelled of rain, wet asphalt, and the exhaust of the city. We had just finished a grueling performance of Mahler's Second Symphony, The Resurrection. The irony does not escape me now. The ovation had been thunderous, a wall of sound that fed the hunger in my ego. But as I walked to my car, the familiar hollowness returned. It was a secret silence I carried, a nagging suspicion that despite the beauty I created, I was merely rearranging the furniture in an empty room. I had fame, I had respect, I had wealth, but I had no song inside of me, only the echo of others' genius. I drove home through the slick city streets, my mind still racing with tempos and dynamics, critiquing the brass section's entrance in the fifth movement. I was so consumed by the music in my head that I never saw the reality in front of me. The truck ran the red light at the intersection of 4th and Grand. There was no pain, not at first, just a violent shattering of the world. The sound of metal screaming against metal was louder, more dissonant than any fortissimo I had ever conducted. The glass exploded like diamond dust, glittering in the headlights of oncoming traffic. And then, absolute silence. It was not the silence of a rest in a musical score, which anticipates the next note. This was a heavy final silence. It was the silence of a tomb. I felt myself detached from the wreckage, pulled upward, not by wind, but by a sudden lack of gravity. I was floating into a space that was neither dark nor light, but vast, terribly, endlessly vast. I expected nothingness. I expected the curtain to fall and the lights to go out forever. Instead, the silence began to hum. It was a vibration that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, a low resonance that shook the very core of my being. It wasn't a sound my ears heard. It was a frequency my soul felt. It was a tone so pure, so foundational, that it felt like the bedrock of existence. And then the darkness tore open, and I saw him. He did not appear as a figure in a stained glass window. There were no robes of white silk or halos of painted gold. He stood before me as a presence of overwhelming, terrifying reality. He was the focus of all light, yet he had the solidity of a mountain. He looked like a man, yet he was so much more. He was the concept of man perfected, the archetype from which all humanity was sketched. When I looked at his face, I felt a shock of recognition that had nothing to do with memory. It was the recognition of a jagged piece of glass, finding the only shape that could make it whole. But with that recognition came a crushing wave of shame. In the brilliance of his presence, my arrogance, my dismissal of his name, my worship of my own talent, it all lay exposed like mud on a pristine marble floor. I felt small. Not just physically small, but metaphysically insignificant. Lord, I stammered. The word tore from my soul, though I had never meant it before in my life. I did not know. I thought I was the one who made the beauty. Jesus looked at me. His eyes were not angry, though they burned with a truth that pierced through every defense I had ever built. He did not speak with a voice like a human, vibrating vocal cords against air. His communication bypassed my ears and resonated directly in my mind, clearer than a trumpet blast, warmer than a cello. Elias, he said. The sound of my name in his voice held more music than every symphony ever written. You have spent a lifetime studying the echo, yet you mocked the voice that shouted it. I was blind. I wept, falling to my knees in this realm of living light. I thought the church was a cage for the simple. I thought I was free because I stood on a podium. Stand up, Jesus commanded gently. I have not brought you here to crush you, but to open your ears. You have listened to the world, but you have never heard the song. He raised a hand, and the space around us dissolved. We were no longer in the void. We were standing in the center of a swirling nebula deep in the cosmos. Look, he said, and listen. I watched as stars were born. Dust and gas collapsed under gravity, but it wasn't just physics, it was a rhythm. I heard a low, thrumming beat, a time signature so complex yet so perfect that my mind struggled to comprehend it. As the star ignited, bursting into a sphere of brilliant fire, it let out a tone, a pure, resonant note that vibrated through the vacuum. Do you hear it? Jesus asked. It's a dominant chord, I whispered, awestruck. It's resolving to something, but I don't know what. It is the sound of creation, he replied. Every atom, every star, every galaxy spins to a rhythm I set in motion. You studied physics, Elias. You know that everything vibrates, but you never asked who hummed the first note. He swept his hand again and the scene shifted. We were drifting over a vast blue ocean on a world that looked like Earth, but pristine, untouched. I saw the moon pulling the tides. I heard the crash of the waves against the shore. Listen to the water, Jesus said. I concentrated. The waves weren't crashing randomly. There was a pattern. Crash, retreat, crash, retreat. It was a metronome keeping time for the life within the sea. The ocean breathes, Jesus explained. It follows the tempo I gave it. If it were to speed up, the land would drown. If it were to slow down, the life within it would stagnate. It is a waltz, Elias, a dance of gravity and water. Then the vision zoomed in, microscopic. I saw a single drop of water, and within it, tiny organisms moving. Even they moved with a rhythm. Their little flagella beat in time. Life is not static, he said. Life is movement. Life is music. When you conducted your orchestra, you demanded unity. You demanded that 80 musicians play as one. Why did you think the universe was any different? Do you think this harmony happens by accident? I thought it was chaos, I admitted, my voice trembling. I thought it was just random chance over billions of years. Chance is noise, Jesus said, his voice firm. I do not create noise. I create symphonies. Chaos cannot produce harmony, Elias. Only a mind can do that, only a composer. The scene changed abruptly. We were standing in the middle of a dense forest. The trees were ancient, their roots gnarled and deep. The wind rustled through the leaves. Listen, he commanded. I heard the wind. But then I heard more. I heard the sap rising in the trunks, a low, steady hum. I heard the birds calling to one another, their melodies weaving together into a counterpoint that no human composer could replicate. It wasn't just noise, it was a conversation. The trees clapped their hands, Jesus said, a smile touching his lips. The birds sing their praises. You thought worship was something humans invented in stone buildings. Elias, the earth has been singing to me since the beginning. You were just too loud to hear it. He walked over to a large oak tree and placed his hand on the bark. The tree seemed to glow under his touch. I sustain this, he said. My song holds the fibers together. If I were to stop singing, this tree would dissolve into dust. I am the fundamental frequency of existence. Colossians says, in him all things hold together. That is not poetry, Elias. That is physics. Then the light shifted, turning gray and sharp. We were no longer in nature. We were standing in the middle of a busy city intersection, perhaps New York, perhaps London. It was loud. Horns honked, people shouted, jackhammers rattled. The air tasted of stress. What do you hear now? Jesus asked. I covered my ears. Noise, discord. It's painful. It has no key. It has no resolution. Look closer, he said. I looked at the people rushing by. I saw their hearts. They weren't glowing like the tree. They looked gray, jagged. I saw a man in a suit shouting into his phone. From his mouth came a black smoke that smelled of sulfur. His words were sharp, staccato bursts of anger. This is the dissonance of sin, Jesus said sadly. This is what happens when the instrument decides it does not need the composer. They are playing out of tune, Elias. They are playing their own frantic melodies, ignoring the rest of the orchestra, and the result is chaos. I watched a woman walking alone, her head down. She wasn't angry, she was despairing. Her heart beat with a slow, irregular rhythm, like a drum with a hole in it. She has forgotten the melody of hope, Jesus said. She thinks she is playing a solo in an empty room. She does not know I am standing right beside her, waiting to give her the beat. Can they be fixed? I asked, feeling a sudden surge of compassion I wasn't used to. Can they be tuned? That is why I came, Jesus replied, to retune the human heart, to restore the harmony that was lost. The world calls it religion or rules, but it is simply retuning the instrument to the pitch it was designed for. The city dissolved, and suddenly I was standing in a room I recognized. It was the practice room at the conservatory where I had studied 40 years ago. I saw a young man at the piano. It was me. I was 20 years old, intense, driven. I was practicing a Chopin nocturne. "Watch," Jesus said. I saw my younger self play. The technique was flawless, but I also saw what was happening in the spirit. Around my younger self, I saw a cage forming. Every time I nailed a difficult passage, the cage got stronger. It was a cage of gold built by pride. "I see a young man who loves music," I said defensively. "I see a young man who is learning to love himself through the music," Jesus corrected. "Look at your heart." I looked. Inside the chest of my younger self, there was a small flame. But as I played, thinking, I am better than everyone here, I will be the greatest, the flame flickered and dimmed. The music was feeding my ego, not my soul. "You mistook talent for holiness," Jesus said. "You thought that because you could make people cry with a melody, you were a god. But you were stealing the glory. The gift was mine, Elias. I gave you those hands. I gave you that ear. And you built a wall around yourself with them. You became a prisoner of your own ambition." The scene shifted again. I was on the podium just a few months ago. I was screaming at the second violins. "Incompetent," I shouted. "You sound like dying cats, again." I saw the face of the section leader, an older man named Thomas. I saw his spirit crumple. I saw a dark dissonance strike him like a physical blow. I was trying to get the perfect sound, I stammered, shame washing over me. It was for the sake of the art. "You were crushing a soul to polish a note," Jesus said, his voice stern. "Thomas was grieving his wife that week. He needed grace. You gave him judgment. You sacrificed a human being on the altar of your perfectionism. Is that beautiful, Elias? Does that sound like music to you?" "No," I whispered. "It sounds like violence." "It is noise," he said. "The greatest symphony played without love is nothing but a clanging cymbal. You created sound, but you destroyed harmony." Jesus turned to me, and the scenery melted into a soft white mist. He took my hands. His hands were rough like a carpenter's, yet warm. "Come," he said. "I want to show you what music is supposed to be." We were standing in a vast open field, but it wasn't empty. It was filled with millions of people. They were of every race, every age, every nation. They were not standing in rows like a choir. They were living their lives. Mothers were rocking babies. Men were building homes. Children were playing. Farmers were harvesting. "Listen with your spirit," Jesus said. I closed my eyes and listened. At first it seemed chaotic. But then, under the guidance of Jesus' presence, the sounds organized. The mother's lullaby blended with the rhythm of the farmer's scythe. The laughter of the children harmonized with the conversation of the builders. It was a massive living chorale. "This is the body," Jesus said. "This is my orchestra. When they live in love, when they serve one another, when they forgive, they produce a sound that reaches the throne of heaven. It is not a performance, Elias. It is a relationship." I saw a man forgive his neighbor for a debt. In the spirit realm, that act of forgiveness looked like a perfect resolution of a suspended cord, a release of tension that brought peace. I saw a woman give her coat to a homeless stranger. That act looked like a soaring flute solo, piercing through the grayness of the world with pure light. "You thought music was dots on a page," Jesus said. "Music is love in action. Every time you show mercy, you play a note in my symphony. Every time you speak truth, you keep the rhythm. The world is the instrument, and your life is the melody." "I have played no notes," I said, tears streaming down my face. "My life has been silent. I have only made noise." "You have played many wrong notes," Jesus said gently. "But the song is not over. That is the beauty of grace, Elias. Grace is the ability to take a wrong note and weave it into a new, more beautiful melody." The vision shifted again. I saw a hill. It was dark, covered in shadows. On top of the hill was a wooden cross. The atmosphere was heavy, suffocating. "This," Jesus said, his voice dropping to a whisper that shook the ground, "is the great silence." I watched as the figure on the cross, Jesus himself, bowed his head and died. In that moment, the entire universe went silent. The stars stopped singing. The ocean stopped its rhythm. It was a pause so profound, so terrifying that I felt like I would cease to exist. The composer entered the silence, Jesus said. I took the dissonance of the world, your pride, the wars, the hate, the noise, and I took it into myself. I let the music die so that I could rewrite the score. Then the earth shook. The tomb cracked open, and a sound erupted that was brighter than 1,000 suns. It was a major chord of such triumph that it rewrote the physics of the universe. Resurrection, Jesus smiled. The minor key resolved into the major. Death was the dissonance and life is the resolution. Because I live, the music can never stop. Do you understand now, Elias? You cannot have the beauty without the sacrifice. You cannot have the resurrection symphony without the cross. I understand. I sobbed. I see it. It's all you. It's always been you. The beauty I chased, it was just a shadow of this. The visions began to swirl faster now. I saw the future. I saw my own village, or rather, my city, transformed. I saw the concert hall, but the atmosphere was different. It wasn't stiff and elitist. It was warm. I saw myself conducting, but I wasn't the tyrant on the podium. I was a servant. I saw the music flowing out of the hall and into the streets, touching people who never bought tickets. I saw a young boy listening to the music and feeling a spark of hope that kept him from joining a gang. I saw a couple on the brink of divorce, sitting in the audience, the harmony of the music reminding them of the harmony of their vows. I saw the musicians playing with joy, not fear, their instruments glowing with that same light I had seen in the tree. This is what is possible, Jesus said. You have a gift, Elias. I gave you the ability to hear and shape sound. Do not throw it away, but do not use it for yourself. Use it to point them to me. But how? I asked. I am a conductor, not a priest. I cannot preach sermons. I do not know theology. You will preach without words, Jesus said. When you lift your baton, you will be lifting a prayer. When you study the score, you will be studying my fingerprints. You will treat your musicians with the dignity of kings and queens, for they are my children. You will conduct with a humility that confuses the critics and heals the listeners. They will hear the difference. They will ask, where does this depth come from? And you will tell them. They will mock me, I said, the fear of my reputation surfacing one last time. They will say the accident made me soft. They will say I have lost my edge. They will say I have become one of those religious fanatics I used to make fun of. Jesus stepped close to me, his face inches from mine. The love in his eyes was fierce. Let them talk. You will be playing for an audience of one. Does the applause of the dead matter to the living? You have seen the stars born. You have heard the song of the ocean. Will you really worry about a review in the newspaper? No, I said, standing straighter. No, I want to play for you. Then one last thing, he said. He showed me a vision of a specific person. It was a man named Julian. That he was a rival conductor, a man I had spent years slandering in the press. I hated his interpretation of Beethoven. I hated his success. I had called him a musical illiterate in an interview just last year. You must forgive him, Jesus said, and you must help him. Julian? I recoiled. He is a hack. He is arrogant. He stole my position at the Philharmonic 10 years ago. He is you, Jesus said. He is trapped in the same cage you were in. If you do not forgive him, your music will still have static. You cannot conduct the song of grace if you are holding a grudge. Call him, encourage him, show him the love I showed you. It was a hard pill to swallow, but in the light of the cross I had just seen, my petty rivalry seemed ridiculous. I will, I promised. Good, Jesus said. The intermission is over, Elias. The orchestra is tuning up. It is time to take the stage. The light began to spin faster and faster, spiraling into a tunnel of white fire. I felt the crushing weight of gravity return. I felt the ache in my bones, the sharp stab of broken ribs, the taste of blood and antiseptic. Remember, his voice echoed one last time, fading but never leaving. I am the composer. You are the instrument. Just play the song. I gasped, my eyes snapping open to the harsh, fluorescent glare of the ICU. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor was the first music I heard. A simple electronic B-flat, repeating over and over. It was the beat of life given back. My recovery was slow. It was November and December of 2024. The doctors called it a miracle that I had survived the crash at all. My car had been crushed like a tin can, but the physical healing was nothing compared to the reconstruction of my soul. I lay in that hospital bed for weeks, often silent, just listening. I no longer heard the world as I had before. I heard the grace in the footsteps of the nurses. I heard the mercy in the rain tapping against the window pane. I heard the longing in the voices of visitors down the hall. The world was no longer dead matter. It was a humming, vibrating testament to the creator I had met in the void. When I was finally discharged, I didn't go straight to the piano. I went to my Bible. I read the Psalms, and for the first time, they weren't just poetic lyrics. They were instructions. Let everything that has breath praise the Lord. I called Julian. It was the hardest phone call of my life. When he heard my voice, he was guarded, expecting an insult or a sarcastic comment about his latest concert. Julian, I said, my voice raspy but steady, I want to apologize. I have been unkind to you for years. Your recording of Brahms, it has a passion I never acknowledged. I hope you are well. There was a long silence on the other end. Then, a softened, confused voice. Thank you, Elias. That means a great deal. When I hung up, I felt a dissonance in my chest resolve into a perfect major third. When I finally returned to the concert hall last month, it was January 2025. The atmosphere was thick with expectation. Rumors had circulated that the great Maestro was changed, that brain damage had softened me, or that the trauma had broken my nerve. The orchestra sat ready, their instruments poised. I saw Thomas, the violinist I had humiliated. He looked anxious, gripping his bow tightly. I walked to the podium. My stride was different. There was no swagger, no dramatic sweeping of the coattails. I moved with a quiet, deliberate gratitude. I stepped up onto the block and picked up the baton. For a moment I paused. I looked at the musicians, really looked at them. I didn't see tools. I didn't see employees. I saw the intricate, beautiful, broken children of the composer. I saw the grief in the cellist's eyes, the hope in the flute player's posture. I tapped the stand gently. Before we begin, I said, my voice echoing in the silent hall. The musicians tensed, expecting a lecture. I want to thank you. It is an honor to make music with you. I have not treated you with the dignity you deserve. For that, I am sorry. Today, let us not play for the critics. Let us play for the joy of it. Let us play because we are alive. The shock in the room was palpable. Thomas's shoulders relaxed. A few musicians exchanged wide-eyed glances. I raised my arms. We were playing Beethoven again, the Pastoral Symphony. But as the first notes rang out, I did not focus on the technical perfection or the speed. I focused on the one who wrote the physics of the sound waves. I focused on the green fields and the flowing water I had seen in my vision. I poured my gratitude, my repentance, and my love into every gesture. I wasn't performing. I was offering. I wasn't commanding. I was inviting. The sound that came back from the orchestra was unlike anything I had ever conducted. It was warm. It was unified. It breathed. It wasn't just accurate. It was alive. We were no longer 80 people trying to be perfect. We were one body trying to be beautiful. During the second movement, the scene by the brook, I felt a presence on the podium with me. I didn't see him with my eyes, but I felt the familiar vibration, the hum of the void, the song of the stars. He was there, conducting through me. After the final chord faded, there was a silence in the hall that I had never experienced before. Usually, the audience rushes to clap to break the tension, but this time the silence held. It hung in the air, shimmering and golden. It was a holy silence. When the applause finally came, it felt distant, irrelevant. I bowed, not to the audience, but inwardly to the king who had sent me back. Later, in the dressing room, the concertmaster, a cynical man who had seen it all, knocked on my door. He looked shaken, his eyes slightly wet. "Maestro," he said, holding his violin case like a shield. "I have played this piece 100 times. I have played it with you for 10 years. But tonight it felt like the roof was gone. It felt like the heavens were open. What changed? Did you change the bowing? Did you change the tempo?" I smiled, feeling the peace that had started in the wreckage of my car bloom fully in my chest. I looked him in the eye, seeing the hunger for truth that lies beneath every artist's skin. "I didn't change the tempo," I told him quietly. "I just met the composer." "The composer? Beethoven?" he asked, confused. "No," I said, pointing upward. "The one who gave Beethoven his ear. I used to think I was the music, my friend. Now I know I am just the instrument. Sit down. Let me tell you about the song I heard in the silence." And there, in the backstage dressing room of a concert hall in the middle of the city, I began to share the vision. I told him about the stars, the ocean, the dissonance of the city and the resolution of the cross. I told him that he was not just a violinist, but a bearer of the divine image, a note in the eternal symphony. As I spoke, I saw the static around him begin to fade, replaced by a faint, hopeful melody. The music had begun. The intermission was over. And I knew, with a certainty deeper than any chord, that I would spend the rest of my life conducting this new, glorious song. My journey is far from over. I still struggle, I still get impatient, but now when I hear the noise of the world, I don't despair. I listen for the underlying rhythm of grace. I know that one day the great conductor will raise his hand for the final movement, and every knee will bow, and every tongue will confess, and the whole universe will resolve into a perfect, eternal harmony. Until then, I hold my baton, I lift my hands, and I play for him.